We're back, and so are Marvel's Avengers, apparently. That game came out on Friday, and I'm just going to say off the top that most of you have played a lot more of it than I expected from the sound of things.
More than I expected, yeah.
I think
Jason beat it.
Jason finished it. I think Jeff also finished it.
I also did, yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like I'm like halfway through the story-ish.
Okay.
It's shorter than
maybe.
I thought it would be.
Huh.
And I appreciate that, actually.
Yeah.
It at no point did it like overstay its welcome. You know, like there was good pacing, I thought. And there was a couple missions where, you know, it just seemed kind of mundane or whatever. But then it was sandwiched by another story beat or another big story moment or whatever. I was rather pleased with the pacing. It's
Definitely getting the vibe that people took to the full game a lot more so than the beta.
Yes, definitely.
I think that's because of the story.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I think the story actually, for the most part, is like really well done. It's like a lot of good, like humanizing moments of the Avengers, you know, not being on the same page, then being on the same page, then not being, you know, like that back and forth kind of told through the eyes of Kamala Khan, I think actually is super effective. Yeah. But then I think like the back third or so, they bring it together at the end, but I think like the back third of that game loses a lot of that focus. And it's just kind of, I don't know. I feel like they kind of they lose it a little bit and then get it back. But I also think for me, like the problem is that I think the gameplay is so repetitive. Like you've seen basically all of the enemies with, you know, some slight variants and stuff like that by the time you've played like 2 missions in that game. It's just robots, and then you're done. Yep. And then it's like, hey, now it's a live game. Go maybe punch some more robots. And it's like, this sucks. It's not engaging. And
yeah, that's also my biggest problem with it. I think that there is a not only a lack in enemy variety, but all the enemies kind of are just, they're like robots, and they're like different, like they've got, this one's got a different laser than the other
dudes.
one.
There are
some dudes. There are some, you know, the bosses are unique, of course, but like
you're fighting dudes in the tutorial. Those aren't robots.
But also like 2 of the bosses are also just bigger robots, and or 3 of them even. It's like for a property, you know, not you know, just the Avengers, even much less like the Marvel universe or something. It feels like they really skimped on involving meaningful characters in that storyline along the way.
Do you think do you think that has anything to do with their post-release content rollout schedule?
Probably.
Like they didn't want to get characters in there too much now that they want to hold back for like big reveals later.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I would hope so.
Like I would have preferred these up front. I don't want to fight MODOK. The guy's dumb. Taskmaster.
And it's not a good fight. Like the MODOK fight is not good. Abomination, like that's like that's practically a tutorial fight. Taskmaster literally is a tutorial fight. So like all of the like big named character fights are like supremely disappointing. And then like one of the first things I did, so that mission, like, you know, then I had to go fight Taskmaster again in doing the mission that we played when we were doing multiplayer on Friday, the one we went out from. Yeah, like
is it a different fight?
Yeah, it's not a tutorialized like here's how to
dodge,
do this. It's more here's how to dodge. Actually, yes. It is a more fully fledged fight, which just means you get up close on them and wail on the buttons.
I have to say, I came around on the combat quite a bit. I initially was a little down on it, and I still don't think it's like incredible, but I think as you start leveling up those characters and getting those skills and seeing the different variants you can play, like I was really cold on Iron Man when I was like playing him in the beta. He was the first one I wanted to play because he's my favorite like Avenger. And I'm like, it's just, he's okay. He's got like this flight stuff, which doesn't feel great. I don't really understand like his purpose, but then you start unlocking his other abilities, like the beam, you can hold on a guy for increased damage. And he does the laser dancing shit, which is pretty cool. Like as you start unlocking that and rolling that in, it starts to feel a lot better.
He's got
and the
different
characters start to feel a lot more unique from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even though they're all just mashing, light and then into heavy or whatever, they have different properties on all of those, and some have different juggle properties that will launch enemies into the air and follow them up. So I found myself doing different loops with different characters, and it changed it up just enough to keep it a little more interesting.
Totally. I think that ends up being like something that works against part of the campaign. Like I think it helps actually, because you're never like struggling to go, oh, what are the controls again? Yes, but also I think like you get to a point where like, so we played that multiplayer session. I played as Iron Man that entire time and leveled up that Iron Man quite a bit, and so I started using Iron Man as my default.
What level is your Iron Man?
So what, like 22 or something. So you get to a point where you've gotten used to having a full skill tree at your disposal, because filling out that skill tree doesn't take much time. Like that skill tree is not like, by the end of that game, I think you'll have everything. It's not like, oh, I got to respec it. It's not that kind of game. But then the story gets to a point where it's like, oh, by the way, here's Black Widow. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to play as Black Widow again. I haven't played as her since the tutorial. And it's like, oh, she has like way fewer options because her skill tree has not been upgraded, and so it's like, oh, now I don't have like a solid like way to deal with this or this. And I ended up experiencing that again when Thor is introduced into the story also, of just like, man, I just feel like I don't have like the stuff that now feels like the basic stuff you need for this to be like an engaging beat 'em up. And so I ended up actually like dying quite a bit at the first like Black Widow encounter, which is dumb because it's just like a basic robot or whatever. But like I had gotten so used to having a lot more options at my disposal that when they locked that back down again, it was like, oh, this actually is like even fucking less engaging. But yeah, I don't know. It's the combat is better once you level up the characters for sure. But also I still think it's like pretty monotonous. Like having those other two trees basically like mostly be specializations that don't.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of like passive skills in there.
Yeah. It's stuff like, oh, you can use the Hulkbuster armor for 5 more seconds. Or it's basically like a lot of options that when you unlock it with one skill point, you can toggle between 3 different options at any time. And that'll be like, for Iron Man that has like 3 weapons, it'll be like, oh, do I want to have like a rocket specialization, a laser specialization, or a repulsor specialization? But like Jason said, like they're all just these like lightly passive upgrades that kind of don't matter. So like
it's not
it feels
that
like
end game power boost that you want from a game like this. You want to feel like once you hit the end game, you want to start unlocking wild shit that makes every enemy feel like weak. You want
but instead the skill tree feels like, okay, we're gonna give you your bread and butter, and then that's it. Like that's it, and that's the bare minimum you need to feel like the game is engaging.
Have they said if they're going to expand on the existing characters post-release, or are they just going to be adding new ones? Like, I wonder if your Captain Americas and Iron Mans are going to get more powers and stuff to do at some point?
I assume that they will just add new characters, and any expansion will be like, hey, here's some new suits you can buy.
Some weird stuff in that shop. You seen that the Cabana Incredible Hulk in there? Just like an open Hawaiian shirt and like hat. Kind of
a lot of those are going to be like famous looks from the comics, right? Like, remember that time Hulk looked like this? Whoa, that was wild, right? Now you can be hidden.
But like I think Ben, you're right. Like you get to what feels like you get past the campaign, so maybe it's not quite end game, but you're like through the campaign and you're like, okay, now let's do all the hyper repetitive stuff, and you fill out that skill tree and you don't feel super powerful. Like the numbers go up. Hey, you're doing more damage. You have equipped more things that give you more passive abilities, or you've gotten the major artifact upgraded to a point where you can click in both sticks to do something. I think mine is like the one I have equipped now is like if any enemy is affected by any status effect, when I click in those sticks, they all blow up and do they take a bunch of damage or whatever it is. But yeah, it's just the action is so monotonous. And like, so the driving it is the story, but then you get out of the story and into like the Avengers initiative, which is like where they're like, hey, here's more of the live gamey kind of stuff. And it's like the same environments. Like I had 2 missions that were in that, like, there's like a Pacific Northwest environment that is on fire. And in one mission, it was like, careful, there's wildfires in the area. And then the next one, the mission briefing said, yeah, I know, right? The mission briefing said, we've carpet bombed the area to give you some cover. But it's like the same exact fucking map. Like you're going to slightly different versions of it, which is, they're reusing their areas, but like they just don't really take advantage of their areas as well as like Destiny has like areas that you go back to over and over and over again. But I think they do a better job of making those areas feel a little bit more fresh. Whereas this feels like there were cases where it felt like I did the same mission 3 times in a row, but they were all different, and all the story stuff is relegated to so we did that mission on Friday where it ended in that Taskmaster boss fight. But because they don't know which characters you're playing as, because it's just the live game portion that's totally removed from story. Like in any mission intro, they'll just have whoever talk. Like if you're not playing as Thor, but they have a line for Thor, they'll have Thor talk, which is fine. But like you beat that boss fight, and then like Maria Hill shows up with a rocket launcher and is like, cuff him. And it's just like all these shield people just show up, and like the cutscene is not any of your characters or anything that you did. And it just feels like they made the most generic out possible for that stuff. And it really takes you out of the driver's seat when you come still just like, I just did that thing. Like all those missions just feel like I just fucking mashed the buttons some more and these dudes died, or even worse, like I stood on these control points and took it over. Like those missions are abysmal.
All of the Avengers initiative stuff just feels really tacked on. Like honestly, it feels like a competent, maybe solid, like 8 out of 10 single player experience with this like 5 out of 10 multiplayer that's sometimes buggy. I mean, we played on Friday.
Sometimes buggy.
Sometimes very often buggy. We played that stream on Friday where at the end of like a 40-minute mission, I died during the cutscene that was like, you beat the level, and I didn't get any loot because I was dead.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of UI stuff getting stuck on screen. I had cases where like Iron Man's thing is he calls down the Hulkbuster armor. That's like his like ultimate ability or whatever. I had cases where I would do it, he would start to go into the animation and then just stand up. And the armor never came, and it burned the use of the item. Like it was on cooldown after that.
Have you seen the videos of Cap's face? Like there's one skin where he just like as he talks, he just kind of does.
That sounds great.
A melted candle.
It was great. Yeah, that actually, I was able to repeat that. I think it's because of a certain costume that he wears. Yeah. But yeah, we were dying while we were playing that. I took some clips as well. There's
other stuff that's just like rookie mistake live game stuff that like other games made these mistakes 6 years ago. Like the idea that you have two there are two factions, each with its own social space. You have to go to each social space to pick up the bounties, and the load times are fucking atrocious.
The load times are really bad.
So it becomes this case of like you can hold all the bounties, no problem, but you have to go to the helicarrier to pick up the 8 shield bounties, and then go to the anthill to pick up the 8 Hank Pym fucking bounties, and you have to go back there. Like the faction vendors are also specific to each location. Stuff that you just go like, man, other games figured this shit out, and realize like you have to make this stuff convenient for players. Like they have made all those same mistakes from years ago.
Everybody has to go through it. Like Diablo 3 had to go through it, and then Destiny went through it, and so like Bungie will be visiting Crystal Dynamics in a year or two and saying, here are the lessons we learned.
Right.
Like the Diablo people went up to Bungie. You know what I mean? Like it seems like
totally.
It seems like nobody, like I don't remember what Warframe looked like at launch, but it just seems like, I guess I feel for the developers tasked with putting something this crazy and like multifaceted together, right? With all these moving parts, but it just seems like nobody can launch a loot-driven service game cleanly with everything there.
Yeah, I guess this seems messier than most, and then on top of that, like it feels like there are lessons that the genre has learned that they have deliberately ignored here for whatever reason. And I even tried it on PC and just had the game crash a bunch because I was just curious if the load times were better, but like the PC version just kept hard crashing for me after missions and stuff like that.
I wanted to ask because like you guys keep talking about the Avengers Initiative stuff as almost sounding like a discrete thing, a different mode from the story. If somebody's just an Avengers fan and they just want to play through a fun Avengers single player story driven game and be done with it, like does this fill that role?
Wait for
well
a
enough?
sale. wait for a sale, because $60 for a game of that length that is so repetitive on the gameplay side, I think is a tough sell. I think some people will definitely get their money's worth out of it and feel okay about it, because I think the story is strong. But I think with where the gameplay is at, the idea of paying $60 for that like 10-ish hour story, no, I couldn't recommend it right now.
And don't forget that it's a technical mess as well.
Right?
Yeah.
Wait. Wait for a sale. Wait for some patches.
I think as far as
I think that story is completely serviceable, and I think it's a good one.
It sounds like that is like that seems like the thing everybody is coming out of this saying, like, oh, that story is better than anybody expected.
I wouldn't like, as somebody who enjoys most of the Marvel movies on a very like base popcorn movie level, I think this doesn't quite hit the highs you get from one of those. But as far as like video game stories go, it's compelling. I think there's good humor. Like, those movies, for better or worse, are full of like a lot of quippy, like Joss Whedon kind of like, snappy dialogue, which this game recreates to mixed success. Like, Tony Stark has a lot of one-liners but like it does a really good job with what Jeff was saying, like making Kamala the focus of the game, kind of introducing this new character who knows so much about the Avengers, cares about the Avengers, lets them have an excuse to have the characters play with each other in a way that you probably wouldn't get from just a straight up like, it's the Avengers and they're on an avenging mission sort of.
I even having only played through the first part of the story, like all the stuff around her feels very like earnest and sincere.
Yeah.
And cute.
She's fantastic.
Yeah. Weird.
And she remains that strong throughout the game.
It's just
she's definitely the heart of that team.
That stuff. It even ends strong. Like I think that's it's a good solid story. Yeah, I think Ben's right. Like it's maybe not going to reach the same height as like a Marvel movie does if you're into those, but it approximates enough of that stuff and has like good moments with even the Avengers. It's not just all Kamala. Like there are good moments with the Avengers interacting with each other that I think are like a decent reward for kind of suffering through the part where you play it.
Okay.
Like, but that's the part where it's like it's so repetitive, man. Like there are not enough boss fights. There's not enough enemy variety. Even if you just remove the part where they're all robots, it's just like it's stock types of enemies that get thrown at you over and over again, and it just doesn't change up enough. And then that permeates the kind of post-game multiplayer content. Also, like, maybe it's partially because the game just came out and people are still working their way through the story. Like I'm checking like trophy completion and like, oh, like 20% of players actually finished the campaign. But like matchmaking is abysmal. Like I never find anyone. You can quick match into anything. It also does the fucking thing, man. Another thing that they maybe I don't know what the actual answer is, but so players join a lobby and then the timer doesn't start until any player clicks the start mission. And so if you're sitting there going like, I want a full game of 4 players, I want to see what this looks like with 4 human players in it, but then one other person match makes in, the first thing they do is they hit launch mission. And then it's never going to fill those other 2 slots. They get filled with AI. And it's just like so fucking frustrating to have someone you're match made with kind of force you into a 2-player game instead of a 4. But I don't actually know what the answer to that is, but other than only let the host launch or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you're joining into a game and the host never launches because those slots are never gonna fill up anyway right now. But someday they will, I guess. But yeah, that was another frustrating one yesterday when I was like, before we do the podcast, like I want to see what this looks like with a full team of strangers. Because even with one other stranger, it was like chaos. We were playing, talking to each other, and it was still like everyone just scattering out, going for different chests and different stuff. But like in that case, you've got like, oh, is he running over to where that chest is, or does he think he know how to get this door open, or should I? Oh, I'm just gonna spawn the next area because I'm tired of watching this guy fumble around and not figure it out. So the other needs to stand. And
the other part of that multiplayer, just not being able to tell who's who, was a big pain.
Yeah.
Because there were multiple parts during that stream last Friday where I would be punching someone that I thought was an enemy, but just turned out to be Jeff because I just couldn't tell.
Yeah, because he was playing Iron Man and he looked like all the goddamn robots.
Might as well be a robot. Wait, does that mean there's friendly fire? Can you
No,
damage
it's
other
just
people?
no.
or-
So you're just like
Kinda will.
whiffing
Okay.
on a
And-
human.
I mean, that's one of my big problems with the game is like, I think since it's a team game and, there are characters like Kamala who have a healing AoE stuff, you should be able to clearly have a feel on where everyone is, but you have to hit up. And then even when you hit up, it doesn't really show you. It'll show you those kind of circles, and you have to kind of look around. And I swear to God, when we were playing on Friday, the up just was not working for me. I just could not find any of my allies.
I think it's got
ever.
2 tiers. It has like 2 tiers of up. There's one that shows allies, and then you hit it again to toggle it to like
Show a path to the objective.
Show a path
and,
to
like,
the objective.
treasure
But
chest.
yes, also sometimes it breaks on top
Yeah.
of that. So it's like, do not buy this game right now. Wait for patches. Even if you're like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm down with it. Even in light of these caveats, like I still cannot recommend with how buggy it is. But then on top of that, like it just needs more content. It needs more variety. It needs better storytelling in the live game portion of it. Like it's missing just a lot of stuff.
The live game portion is just unappealing to me. As much
It
as I
shouldn't-
like,
yeah, it almost shouldn't be there. But then
it feels like
feels
a
tacked on and it feels half baked.
It just doesn't feel like a setting that lends itself to being a live game to begin with, right? Like any other game like this, pretty much you are playing a faceless character that you create that has no identity of their own, allowing you to map your own identity onto them, right? And then you can get costumes that look like whatever you want, and like you know what I mean. Like you're like you're playing like well defined roles here that are like you can't necessarily like build a character of your own on top of Captain America, who is his
and if
own
you only
character,
leveled
right?
up one character and someone else is playing as that character, you can't use them. So but which they kind of get around in the I mean, presumably you work that out if you're playing with friends, but in matchmaking they have options for matchmake as my hero or matchmake as any hero. So if you deliberately are like, no, I'm Iron Man, I need to be Iron Man, it will filter matchmaking appropriately in theory. I mean, I never matchmade into much at all. And when I opened a lobby, no one ever joined it. So, or one person eventually joined it, but they at least acknowledge that like, oh, you kind of need to be able to force your hero one way or the other.
Now it's the typical loot game trajectory, though, right? Of like, none of them are like done when they come out.
Yeah,
like,
this one just feels like especially undone, I guess.
But just like a
and-
year from now, we might be telling a very different story about this game. Who knows? No,
I'm actually curious.
Like I don't because the story will still be good, but unless their add-ons include another whole story that is written with this level of care and all that other stuff, like no, because even if you polished up the bugs, that action is still that action.
Yeah.
And that's just not engaging.
I'm okay with the action. I am fine with that, but as Jeff mentioned, the repetition of enemies is abysmal. We're seeing everybody like in the first couple missions. There's very little story content, and what little story content there is in the live mission stuff is not great.
I think they've
said
they're going to add more.
I don't know how you fix it.
Right? I think they said they're adding more mission story stuff after launch. I believe I read that.
I would assume so. Like at some point, they have to be like,
they've got to add.
Oh,
new
Hydra
bosses.
showed up.
Yeah.
There's got to be like, hey, another faction showed up, or there's got to be something.
Do they do the anthem thing of like the ending of the story? It's like here's the next faction you will be fighting in the post-release content.
No, like that's the thing is like the actual like end game like justification setup is just like, well, it's still fucked up.
There's someone else, I guess.
Guys, but it's still the same guys. But now someone else is in charge. We got to figure out what's going on out here. Everything that you were fighting against is still a problem. Now go fight more robots, but with less
Which
story.
sucks because it takes the oomph out of the ending of the story, which is the best part of the game.
Yeah.